Remember that song?
It's kind of protocol. During council meeting, there was a meeting.
Oop, there it is.
Oop, there it is.
7 bells. It should go 7 times. Ding, ding.
Welcome to the regular meeting of Council, Town of Oliver, August 26, 2019. This meeting to order, and I'll ask the CEO if there's any late items to add to the agenda.
There are no late items.
No late items. I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Councillor Rice, second for Councillor Burns.
Question, would that resolution from this afternoon's meeting regarding the
Police?
police, would that be late?
I just asked about that and I was told no, it doesn't need to come forward. Because we've just been given direction at this point in time.
Okay.
Second motion.
Second motion from Councillor Bentamina. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Nothing to rise and report. Closed meetings this afternoon. Move to item E, adoptions of prior minutes. Adoption of July 22nd, 2019 regular open council meeting minutes. Councillor Bentamina, second. Councillor Rice. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to committee reports. Have the July 22nd, 2019 committee of the whole meeting minutes for receipt. Moved by Councillor Bentamina, second by Councillor Schwartzenberger. No further discussion. Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now we'll get a verbal report from Chairperson Councillor Schwartzenberger from the August 26, 2019 committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. We had 2 items on the Committee of the Whole meeting today that took quite a lot of time, and we had a lot of input into them. The first one was regarding the Gallagher siphon repair, and we had a lot of discussion on several new options that were brought forward by our consulting group about different options to repair the Gallagher Lake siphon. And the motion that came forward out of that was staff is to start designing and moving forward with a low head siphon design and provide more information on new and previous options discussed at the meeting. The other item we discussed was vacation rentals and how the town will deal with those. There was lots of discussion over the survey results and suggestions for changes to applicable bylaws to govern vacation rentals. There was a couple of people from the audience that asked questions at the end of the meeting, and the motion that came forward was that council receive the results from the vacation rental survey and direct staff to bring forth amendments to the zoning bylaw, the official community plan, and the business license bylaw to permit vacation rentals as outlined in the Director of Development Services report dated August 26, 2019. And that is my report.
Thank you, Councillor Schwartzenberger. We'll move to water matters. Item 1 is the July 2019 Water Quality Summary Report. I'll refer to the CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the report in front of you for July of 2019. The distribution system is in its summer mode of operation, and surface water for the irrigation use, along with some groundwater in System 2. All of the groundwater pumps are used for domestic use only. Again, we are trending higher up with our average maximum temperature. It was 30.9 from 1981 to 2010. The average daily maximum temperature was 29.8. So we continue to be higher in our temperatures, as well as we are lower in our precipitation for the month. We had a total of 18 millimeters recorded, and from 1981 to 2010, there was 25.5 millimeters for the month of July. And extreme daily rainfall was 44.5 millimeters on July 1st, 1924. And this year we had 4.0 millimeters on July 6th, 2019. The proposed motion in front of council is that the council receives the water quality report for July 2019. If there's any questions, I may be able to answer them.
Councillor Bentamina has a question.
Not a question, just a comment. So I went straight to the temperature page because it's felt like a colder and wetter summer than normal, but apparently it's not. And what I noticed is just for clarification, I think that there's a couple of the numbers are backwards. So the mean and the minimum temperatures for this year, I think they've just been reversed in the report, so they just need to be switched around.
Okay.
That's it.
Any further questions? Councillor
I just
Madison?
have a question. Are we still on water restrictions?
Yes, we are still on level 1.
And how often does that get reviewed?
They review it on a weekly basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Machial?
So I presume our aquifers are still down at those levels that we're running.
No.
Can I get a mover to receive the report? Councillor Madison, second. Councillor Grace, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Water Councillor Sidhu, anything to report this evening?
Just as that movie.
Thank you. Councillor Michelle?
Same thing for me.
Okay, moving on to bylaws, item 1, Good Neighbor Amendment Bylaw 1357.02 for adoption or for to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. This bylaw is in front of council for adoption, as you had indicated. It's amendments to section 9 of the bylaw, as there was sections that were not properly identified and were being referred to. So this is just a correction for that.
Questions, comments, council? Do I have the
I'll move adoption.
adoption? Councillor Schwartzenberger, second by Councillor Bentamina. One last chance for discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item H2, Business License Amendment Bylaw 1368.01 for adoption, refer to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you indicated, it's for adoption. It's an amendment to the schedule for fees for business license to include retail cannabis with the liquor establishment, restaurant, and lounge.
Adoption by Councillor Bentamina. Second by Councillor Grace. Any further discussion, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item H3, Affordable Housing Development, 5931 Airport Street, refer to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will pass this over to our Director of Development Services, as I was not in attendance for the last couple of weeks. And he was the one that did attend the public consultation.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this application before us is for second reading for proposed zoning and OCP amendment at 5931 Airport Street. The applicant is proposing to construct 46 units of affordable housing designed for families and seniors. With this, they're proposing to amend designation on Schedule B, the zoning map of the zoning bylaw, from highway commercial site specific to residential high density site specific. Also, they're proposing to bring forward some amendments that were done in 2007 with that site specific application, which is for on-site vehicle parking requirements. So they're proposing to carry forward that requirement. So 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling where there's 2 bedrooms or more, and 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit with less than 2 bedrooms. We're also proposing to carry forward the maximum building height to 14.7 meters above sea level, and that relates to the operation of the Oliver Airport. So we're proposing to carry forward this restriction unchanged. Also, this application is proposing to amend designation of Schedule B of the OCP map, so changing the OCP from commercial highway to high density residential. And lastly, it's proposing to amend Schedule F, which is the development permit area map, from commercial development permit area to multifamily development permit area. So a bit of the resolution history. On July 8th, 2019, Council passed the following resolution: that OCP Amendment Bylaw 137007 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 138008 be read a first time, and that prior to second reading, which is today, the applicant must convene a public information meeting in accordance with Section 4.1 of the Town of Oliver Land Use Procedures Bylaw 1367 in order to provide an additional opportunity for the public to access information and inquire about the proposal, and provide the town with a copy of all representations received at this meeting, including a summary of any proposed changes as a result of feedback received at the public information meeting. So the public information meeting was held on August 13th, 2019 at the Oliver Community Center from 3 to 6 p.m. Members of Machial Housing Society, which will be the eventual operators, and Machial Development Services, along with Ellis Don Corporation, which will be the builders, the lead contractors, and Town of Oliver staff were in attendance to help answer any questions about the proposed development. Notice for the meeting was sent out to adjacent neighbors and advertised in the Oliver Chronicle on Thursday, August 1st. A summary of the feedback from the public was provided and included in the agenda package. The public appears to be very supportive of the project, stating the high need for affordable housing in the community and the appropriateness of the location, which is close to stores, employment, and the community center. Suggestions were made regarding incorporating a community garden in the unused southeast portion of the property. Other suggestions were made around providing more suites for families, so the 2 and 3 bedroom units, which is all still being reviewed and determined by BC Housing. So with that information, staff are recommending that OCP Amendment Bylaw 137007 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 138008 be read a second time and proceed to the public hearing, and that the holding of the public hearing be scheduled for September 9th, and that staff give notice of the hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. And there's your options for council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gould. Any questions, comments from council? Councillor Grace?
I do have one comment. I do support the recommendation. I would just like to make a comment to Ellis, Don, and Machial that I hope that efforts are being made to look into more 2 and 3 bedroom units. I understand that there's a per door funding formula with BC Housing, but as of early July, there are 40 to 50 applications for families with Kiwanis Housing right now. So the housing needs for families currently are huge. There is still a large need for seniors, so I know it's going to meet those needs with the 1 bedrooms as well. But to me, when I looked at the breakdown of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms that was being proposed, it was disproportionate to the actual needs of the community.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Can I get a mover on the motion? Councillor Grace, second by Councillor Davila. Any further discussion, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to business, item 1, non-medical cannabis retail license 6341 Main Street and 2255717 Main Street. I'll refer to the CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm going to refer this also over to Mr. Poole.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. This is for a local government recommendation for non-medical cannabis retail store applications. At their locations, Blue Water Cannabis, 6341 Main Street, and BC Cannabis, 2255717 Main Street. So the purpose of this report is for council to direct staff to either send a recommendation of support or denial to the BC Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch regarding the proposed non-cannabis retail store locations listed at 6341 Main Street and 2255717 Main Street. So just wanted to provide a beautiful map showing the current applications. So you'll see the ones in red are the ones that you're considering tonight. So Blue Water Cannabis at the north portion of the town, and then BC Cannabis at the south end of town. So the one in the center, Higher Path, has actually just received fit and proper, so they'll be going through the town process, so you'll likely see that one at the council meeting in the middle of October. And then the two in the green, Tumbleweeds and Interior Cannabis, they're still going through the fit and proper assessment, so there's no estimated timeline on those applications and when you will be seeing them. So a bit of a background: through the implementation of zoning bylaw 1380 in July 2018, cannabis dispensary became a permitted use in the town center and highway commercial zones. These are the primary commercial zones within the town of Oliver. Following that process, the town's land use procedure bylaw 1367 was amended to include procedures for processing cannabis applications. So just a quick breakdown of the process. To obtain a non-medical cannabis retail store license within the town of Oliver, the following steps are to be followed as per the land use procedure bylaw. So the application to the liquor and cannabis branch, then the applicant undergoes a fit and proper assessment, which is comprised of detailed security screenings and background checks. Once the applicant passes, an application to the town of Oliver is required. So just of note, the LCRB will not issue a license for a private store without a positive recommendation from local government. So even though council has determined that it's a permitted use in these two zones, the town center and the highway commercial zones, they still need a recommendation from council. Then the next step is the application is reviewed internally by town of Oliver staff, and a 28-day public notification process commences. Staff prepare a report with technical comments and public feedback, and council provides a recommendation. If it's positive, then it's forwarded back to the LCRB for their final processing, inspections, licenses, that type of thing. So the two subject properties tonight that we'll be discussing: Blue Water Cannabis on the left is located next to the Pharmasave on Main Street, and then BC Cannabis is in the northwest corner of the new mall at the south end of town. It's a vacant building, a vacant CRU right now next to Bosley's. So some photos of subject properties. This is Blue Water Cannabis, the front elevation, so showing the empty unit there. And then the BC Cannabis store, the west elevation on the left, so that's from Highway 97, and then the east elevation showing the front entrance, and the north elevation, so that's the view from Southwind Avenue. The zoning map: Blue Water Cannabis on the left is zoned town center, and BC Cannabis on the right is zoned C2, which is highway commercial. So just speaking briefly about Blue Water Cannabis, the store is approximately 500 square feet in size with a further 2,800 square feet expansion space behind it. The store will employ approximately 4 to 6 people. Tentative store hours are from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. and it's a small but modern store. So there's some front renderings on the left and an interior rendering on the right. Another interior rendering on the left, and then the floor plan on the right. So regarding the public feedback, 41 signatures of support were submitted by the applicant, comprised mainly of local residents with a handful of residents from neighboring communities. 4 feedback forms were submitted, 2 in support and 2 against the proposed location. Some of the reasons for not supporting the application were that their nearby residential units could be impacted negatively, and that a cannabis store is an unappealing and unattractive look for Main Street. Now speaking to the BC Cannabis store, I wanted to note that public stores are established and operated by the Liquor Distribution Branch, the LDB, and authorized under the Cannabis Distribution Act rather than the Cannabis Control and Licensing Act. Thus, they actually do not require a fit and proper assessment, or they don't require a license from the LCRB. But that being said, the BC Cannabis store is committed to working with local governments, and town staff are of the mind that both private and public stores should be treated equally, so we took them through the same process. And on the right is a picture of the BC Cannabis store that's open now in Kamloops. So the store will be approximately 2,000 square feet in size, will employ approximately 6 to 12 unionized workers. Tentative store hours, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Wages will start at $21 an hour with benefits and a pension plan. Modern design with a round display case in the center. And then regarding the actual public feedback, we never received any feedback from anyone, whether positive or negatively, about this location. There's some sample interior renderings from other stores. So with that, there's some options for council. So option 1 is that council directs staff to send a recommendation of support to the BC, British Columbia Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, LCRB, for for non-medical cannabis retail store licenses for the following properties. So 6341 Main Street, which is Blue Water Cannabis, and 225-5717 Main Street, which is BC Cannabis. The other option is that council directs staff to send a recommendation of denial for the proposed locations at 6341 Main Street and 225-5717 Main Street. The third option is that the applications are referred back to staff. And staff's recommendation is that council direct staff to send a recommendation of support to the British Columbia Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for non-medical cannabis retail store licenses for the following properties: 6341 Main Street, Blue Water Cannabis, and 225-5717 Main Street, BC Cannabis. That's it, thank you.
Any questions, comments, council? Councilor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. In regards to the provincial cannabis store, it seems like the number of jobs dropped from the original presentation. I thought it was up to 14 or something like that. It's just a comment. It doesn't really change my opinion. But I think it's great that there's new businesses opening on Main Street, filling up some of those empty storefronts, and I would move the recommendation that's no longer up there, but as proposed, that council directs staff to send a recommendation of support to the British Columbia Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch for non-medical cannabis retail store licenses for the following properties.
A second. Councilor Matheson. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Schwartzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Mr. Houle. It's like a big discrepancy in the size of these two operations. Is there a minimum size, or one's 4 times the size of the other? Does that go in any way, or is that just covered under the fit in whatever fit in proper study that the government does?
Thank you, through the chair. I don't believe there's a minimum size requirement. I know that the Blue Water location, there is the small 500 square foot in the front, but there are plans potentially to expand into the back, which then would bring that up to close to 3,000 square feet. So then it would be more of, it would match the other locations, but I don't believe there's a minimum store requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions, comments, council? I'll call the question, and those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item 2, reserve and surplus funds policy. I'll refer to the CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will ask Mr. Leahy to go through his report with that.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to present Council a reserve policy that will ensure the long-term financial stability, maintenance, and safeguarding of existing assets, as well as to provide funding for operational emergencies as they occur. Just a little bit of background: the formulation of a reserve funds policy has been an outstanding request for a number of years. As indicated in the report, various reserve policies were researched, as well as utilizing the government finance officer's best practices and policies. The policy has been modified from its initial presentation in July, specifically updating the description of the police reserve, the inclusion of the general capital reserve, and those changes have been highlighted in yellow. As well, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background as to why reserves are important to the municipality, to any municipality, and they're created for unique and special corporate purposes with its primary objectives of ensuring stable and predictable tax levies, focusing on long-term financial stability, safeguarding and maintaining existing assets, as well as providing for operating emergencies and financing of new capital assets. The policy itself, as you can see, is quite extensive, and it goes through different guiding principles, the policy administration, etc. And I'm not going to read that all out. I'm sure you've all read that already, and we have gone through this in July as well. So with that, I'm open to questions, Your Worship, or comments.
Councillor Machial.
Your worship, I'm glad that Councillor Sidhu and I stuck around because there's a bunch of water portions. There's some, I guess it was over like we should have been watered, underwater matters. There's a transfer of different reserves back and forth within water.
That was where it had started off with. When we first introduced it, it was underneath water matters. The first time coming back, it did get placed in the wrong location.
That's fine. I read it. So I don't know how you'd like to proceed. Maybe the water councillors would be allowed to vote on the water portions of that and not vote on that other transfer that the CFO was asking.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. This may clarify for Councillor Machial as well. I took the liberty of meeting with Mr. Leahy this afternoon because I try not to surprise people, but I did go through this and made several recommendations for changes for him, which he agreed, and I'll go through with council. Under 3.4, minimum optimum reserve balances, there was no opportunity for it to come back to council anywhere in the policy, so I suggested that it be something to be written in there to be presented back to council every year with the reserve balances and potential transfers and that sort of thing, that council have the opportunity to review. In 7.5, I recommended that the later portion of, let me get to it here, there's more of a description there at the very end. This will be brought forward as part of the 2020 budget deliberations. Currently no clear direction on how reserve is to be utilized, that sort of thing. As this is going to be a policy in place for many, many years to come, there was no need for that sentence to be in there, so it was recommended that would be deleted. I also asked on 7.14, the road capital reserve, it gives specific ways that we are supposed to fund our road improvements, and I asked it that if that resolution has been followed, and I was informed that no, it has not been followed in the past, and it certainly wasn't in the last year, and I suggested that should be brought forward for that to be rescinded by council. That resolution should be rescinded, and then this could be changed accordingly. And then on 7.18, it talked about one of the water reserves that Councillor Machial was referring to, that it should be transferred to a different reserve, and I thought that if that was the case, because this is a statutory reserve, that the bylaw would have to change in order to facilitate that movement, or the movement to the new fund name would have to be changed in the bylaw, which would require council ratification. So basically what it came down to after my discussion with Mr. Leahy was that, and he agreed that there needs to be changes in this, and it needs to come back before council before we can move forward with it. I don't know if other people have other recommendations or things that they noticed as well, but if they do, he's definitely open to the change, and I think if I understood the discussion today, that his preference is that we bring this back to council at a later date after it's had an opportunity to review and change, and that may be the opportunity to put it back under the water matters at that time and talk about transfers at that particular time. As there is no real pressure to change where the money is sitting, because the budget's already been set, it could be as late as next year at our budget time before we make any transfers whatsoever. And that would be part of our review process, where we look at balances and everything in every reserve, and as a separate meeting almost, before we make that decision. So I don't know if that clarifies for Councillor Machial or not.
Councillor Machial.
Well, one of the ones that popped up right away was that water capital charge reserve, because I believe there was a bylaw there, and Councillor Mattis is correct on that, so we'd have to change that. I think it's appropriate, at the very least, to delay this till budget time. I think as part of our budget process, we should then we can discuss if we want to amalgamate reserves, or if we want to eliminate some of them and transfer the funds into other reserves. I think that'd be much more appropriate at budget time. So I agree that we should delay this.
But the policy itself could be implemented now.
But
It's just the transfers. The transfers wouldn't happen, but the policy itself could be implemented without the transfers.
And what's the difference?
Well, the reason is that when you're talking about a policy, that's something that's in place for many, many years to come. And like 717 Solid Waste Reserve or the Tuckaloo Water Reserve, for example, those are one-off actions that we should take, and they actually shouldn't be part of the policy.
So are you proposing that those be removed and then pass the policy?
Pass an amended policy, because it's actually a policy and procedure, and these are one-off items that we would do. They don't need to be on the record for the next 100 years.
Through the chair, that I think it would be appropriate at least to have a new report come forward showing that those have been taken out of the policy before we approve the policy.
Exactly. And that's,
So it's not, so we don't need to vote on this in the office.
yeah.
I, go, make sure it goes into one matter, please. Thank
So,
you.
unless there's more comment from the other councils, I would make a motion that this be referred back to staff and further information.
Not really.
I would agree. Councillor
We should
Rice.
get back.
There's a motion on the table now, so I'll have to wait for comments.
Has been seconded.
Did we just motion?
I made a motion, but it hasn't been seconded, so.
What was the motion?
Motion is that we referred back to staff for more information.
I just had a couple comments, just looking at appendix A and B that was provided in the report here, that the Tuckaloo Reserve and the Water Capital Charge Reserve are not non-statutory reserves, it was just the Water Capital Reserve that was the statutory reserve. And then in 3.1, it did mention that there would be an annual review and report to council under responsibilities.
Did I miss that?
So, 3.1 responsibilities, just the bottom of that page there, conducting an annual review of the reserve surplus and the municipal funds, and reporting the results to town council. I don't know if that
That's,
answers your
yeah,
concern.
it did.
The rest of it's too fast. So, that's
Any further comments? We have a motion. Council refer the reserve and surplus policy back to staff for additional information. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item 3, investment policy, referred to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Closed it.
Once again, this policy has been an outstanding request of, I'm not sure if it was this council or previous councils, in regards to having an investment, a formal investment policy. In July, brought forward this investment policy to council at that time, just outlining the policy itself, basically outlining what the city, what the town should be invested in, what we can invest in accordance with the community charter. And then I outlined the various investments that we can actually invest in. I go through the objectives and adhering to statutory requirements, safety of capital, liquidity of investment, and return on investment. So when we're investing our funds, we have to first of all ensure that it's legal, that it's followed within the community charter that governs us, as well as we want to make sure that all of our surplus funds are invested safely to ensure there's diversification. We manage risk, as well as we have access to that money if we need it quite quickly. And at the same time, with all those things, is trying to get a decent return on investment. And I did incorporate from our last meeting in July an added response in the responsibility number 4, where it previously stated that the chief financial officer was assigned the responsibility. Now it's saying that the chief financial officer and the chief administrative officer are assigned as well. So you're having a segregation of duties, which is a very good thing. And as well, that was added into number 6, that same requirement where the two positions would be involved in either signing off or placing the investments. Other than that, there hasn't been any change in this report that was brought from when it was brought forward in July. Thank you, Worship.
Comments? Councillor Jones?
Once again, Your Worship, I think that the 2 water councillors would deserve a vote on this because there's $1 million in our water fund, and obviously we're investing that, and I'd like to know who's in control of that and who's investing it. That's a,
Any further comments?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will ask Mr. Leahy to go through his budget timeline for 2020 because they're coming up fast and furious.
Thank you, Your Worship. This memo is to provide council with a 2020 budget timeline, so you can start to put things in your calendar, and as well as the clerk can also start to book some dates. Now, some of these dates obviously are going to change depending on various your own requirements at meetings, etc. And so we have to be flexible with our schedule, but I thought I'd put that out there now just to give everybody a heads up. This is the timeline, and that we're going to start deliberating in November, the water sewer budgets, fire capital and operating, and then continue on into January, and then ultimately the reading of the tax rates bylaw and adopting the bylaw in April. So I'm just putting it out there. These are legitimate dates. I did look them up and I checked, but once again I'll have to make sure with the clerk that there are appropriate dates in case there's conflict of meetings, etc.
Any questions? CEO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to take this opportunity to apologize that the last 3 items should have all been underneath the water matters section. And we will ensure that in the future they are in the appropriate place.
Any questions, comments? Councillor Madison?
Just comment that it's great to have this early, gives us opportunity for planning in a big way. It's something new and I really like it, I appreciate it.
Councillor Benjamin?
Once I tried to go back and forth and see what works and what doesn't work, so it's helpful once they start getting thrown in the calendar. But the only thing that stood out, I think, was February 17th is a holiday.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Didn't they move it?
They moved it to the second, or did they move to the
I think
third?
they moved it from the second to the third.
Yeah,
They moved it.
it's the same as Alberta, I know that,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
And
Okay.
the April 13th should be a holiday, because that's my birthday. Leave that one on.
You can leave that one.
That's your day.
Oh, we can buy you a beverage.
There we go. No, I'm pretty sure the 17th is a holiday.
Everyone
Okay.
got that on the
Yeah,
camera.
exactly.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right, the 17th is a holiday. So that date for sure has to change.
It'll be the 18th,
It'll be the 18th.
It'll be the 18th.
Tuesday.
Do we need to move or see?
And with that, Your Worship,
Move
that's
it as amended.
Yeah.
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 I'll move that council approve the 2020 budget timeline as amended.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Benjamin? Any further comments, any dates to change?
That's all.
I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, Sister City Program Initiatives Agreement. Refer to the corporate officer.
Nope. Thank you, Your Worship. The Sister City Program Initiatives Agreement was presented to Council previously. The Oliver Tourism Association representatives came before Council and outlined some of the initiatives that they thought may be good to keep the program as enhanced as it is. Staff were directed to meet with Oliver Tourism to negotiate a new agreement. The CAO and myself, we met with representatives from OTA. We discussed some of the initiatives that they were considering. In the report, it does note that it was thought that maybe they may be more tourism related than sister city related, and they agreed, and that can be brought forward when the Oliver Tourism Association does their new agreement. One of the other items that they thought would be important would be the removing the 1/3 funding support for airline tickets to assist youth and chaperones. We did talk about the high cost of traveling to Bandai, but you know that while they're there, their expenses are covered, so there is, you know, a little bit of give there. So we thought that what could be stated would be that additional funding could be accommodated with the provision that fundraising must occur by youth and chaperones, and OTA thought that that would be a given, that they would do some very active fundraising and try to raise as much money as they could for both the youth and the chaperones attending. There was discussion as well with the increase in the dollar amount for Bandai to $1,500. We thought it may be more palatable by council to have it at 1,000. So we're suggesting that we bring that forward to 2020 budget discussions for that increase in funding for the Bandai component of the Sister City Initiative Agreement. So we've drafted a agreement. It's somewhat the same with the change with the accommodation, but it's only until the end of this year. That give council an opportunity to do their budget deliberations, and if that funding is increased, we could then modify the agreement and enter into an agreement with them for a longer period of time. So the resolution before council is to approve the Sister City Initiatives Agreement with Oliver Tourism Association for the term August 9th, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, and that increasing the funding allocation by $1,000 for the years 2020 to 2024 be brought to the 2020 budget deliberations for council's consideration, and that council authorizes the signing authorities to endorse the Sister City Initiatives Agreement.
Any comments, questions? Councillor Schwartzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to the corporate officer. I don't understand why we're only doing this for 4 months. Can it be done for a longer period, like till 2024 or whatever, and then the funding allocations go up and down in the year depending on what council's wishes are? I don't see that having to redo this again in January, because obviously it will run out in December and then we'll have to go through this step again in January. Why don't we just do a longer period of time?
Thank you, Your Worship. This was suggested just to do it for this year due to the fact that the budget has already been set for this year. And the discussion around whether or not you wanted to increase the $1,000 be done during your 2020 budget. You could do it for till 2024, but then we just have to do a modification agreement if council decides to increase the funds.
Okay. Still doesn't make sense to me, but okay.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair to the CA or corporate officer, I'm not sure. So we don't currently have an agreement, is that correct? Or our agreement
That's
expired?
correct. The agreement expired at the end of last year.
Okay.
And we brought it forward to them. There was a delay due to the fact that they were closed for a while at the beginning of the year. And then they brought forward this request to increase the funds and expand the program. And it came to council, and then it was directed over to staff to do the negotiations. And we have done that, and this is
So doing it this way means there's no budget implications at this point until
Exactly.
so we have time to have that.
Yeah, the
budget time.
discussion on the increase in the fund.
And if I may, I just have one other question. So just to clarify, the 1/3 funding support for flights, so the town was previously paying for 1/3 of the flight of the delegation?
Yeah.
Councillor
Sorry, thank you. Just to follow up on that point then, because we haven't had an agreement since January and there's no activities scheduled for the next 4 months, do we actually even need to do this, or should we just leave it until budget deliberations? I understand the point of if we're gonna do it now, only doing a couple months and then starting a new one in January,
Yeah.
but then is this
it should be because they have done work for us and that gives us the authority to provide them with the funds through the agreement.
No, we haven't funding for this year.
So they haven't received their funding for this year.
No agreement.
OTA?
OTA for the sister city, I
Oh,
think,
for Sister City.
I think we gave them
Yeah.
last year's,
Yeah, we gave them last year's, yeah.
yeah, but we have not given them this year's.
That makes sense then.
Although there should have been sufficient funds in their reserves to cover any expenses that they incurred this year.
Yes, because they did nothing for the last 2 years.
There was a delegation last year of businessmen, I do believe,
Yeah.
in
I think
20.
there's still sufficient funds, I don't know what the last report was at.
Just to clarify, so you're working on in terms of reference for a new agreement, which
Um,
indicates there may be some changes in this agreement?
We're bringing forward the same agreement, and we have done a slight change with regards to the ability for paying for the students, I do believe, the flights. We've done that modification. However, we're waiting for council 2020 budget discussions with regards to increasing the fee.
Is there any way we can ask for more than a month of advance notice? I know that they knew 3 months in advance of this last delegation, but we only found out a month. in
Yeah,
advance.
we can modify it to include that.
Councillor Minby?
On that exact note, I was going to ask, so it's not included in here, and I don't actually know if this is the proper place to include it, but is there a way in our agreement to set out, terms around visits? Notice is one thing, but even just, organized events, it's like an official event, so that has something to do with the town, and has
Yep.
the mayor in attendance and those sorts of things. So I don't think this is the place to do it, I just don't
No,
really know where you.
we could, may I suggest that we do this agreement that we have in front of us right now for the remainder of this year, and then we can include, some additional information in the new contract for the extended period to ensure that, council is apprised, prior to 1 month prior to that, as well as make sure that there is a function where, it is basically, includes all of council.
So if this is, I mean, those are just a couple of ideas, there might be more, maybe before the next agreement is written up, is it possible to have it at a committee of the whole?
Sure, we can do that again.
Again, yeah, exactly, but now we've been through it a bit and kind of thought about,
Yeah.
banter back and forth a little more.
Yeah.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. I will move the proposed motion that council approve the Sister City Initiatives Agreement with Oliver Tourism Association for the term of August 2019 to December 31st, 2019, and that increasing the funding allocation by $1,000 for the years 2020 to 2024 be brought to the 2020 budget deliberations for council's consideration, and that council authorizes the signing authorities to endorse the Sister City Initiative Agreement.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item 6, Community Emergency Preparedness Fund 2019, Evacuation Route Planning Grant Opportunity, refer to the CAO.
I'll pass it over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to seek a supportive resolution from council to make an application to the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund that's currently offered through EBCM. The grant opportunity is for evacuation route planning with an application deadline of April 17th, 2020. It will, the cost will include some staff coordination time and some in-kind staffed hours. The eligible grant is for 100% of funding for expenses, and as I said, the grant is worth $25,000. Town of Oliver, we do have an emergency plan. It has had some minor updating over the years, and after the Okanagan Mountain Park fire, there was an evacuation route planning guide done back in 2003 that it would definitely warrants some updates. The water and sewer utility, they do have an emergency response plan, and that was just revised in 2012. Under the Local Government Act, local governments are required to update their emergency response plan at least every 3 years, so this would be a big component of that updating of that plan. With the work that we've done with our Emergency Operations Center and our Emergency Social Services components as well, so tying those all together would make a strong plan. I did discuss the grant with the fire chief, and he thought that it might be worthy to identify routes for the fire service area, which would include a Sois Indian Band and parts of Electoral Area C. So if that's the case, there may be opportunity to apply for a regional grant, and I could reach out to the regional district and Sois Indian Band at that time to see if they're wanting to participate with the town. So the resolution before council is to authorize staff to submit a application for grant funding through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for evacuation route planning with a deadline of April 17, 2020, and that council supports providing overall grant management for the grant opportunity, and that this project would likely not be undertaken without 100% program funding through UBCM.
Thank you, Worship. I would move the proposed motion, but does it need to be in the motion that we would look for opportunities to apply for a regional grant?
It would
Or
still
is
be the
it
same
sort of-
application.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's right.
Any other comments?
Motion.
No. Do I have a second? A second, Councillor Benjamin.
I do have a comment to make. I'm not opposed to these types of things, and it's always nice when the provincial government hands out money. But when I read the line that says it takes up staff time, that always concerns me, because it's great to have this stuff, but then when we look at our priority lists and the things that we want to accomplish, these things take away from that. So it kind of cut, because staff time is required to do this, either A, for the application, or B, for the work afterwards, and that takes away from other things. Like I say, I'm not opposed to it, but I just think everyone needs to be aware of the pressure when, it's nice that the government hands out money, because that's really what it is, and then you also have to think that once they, and as they often do, they'll hand out money the first time, but then when this needs to be updated in 2 years, we're on our own. So, it's kind of a bit of a velvet glove handout type of a thing. You have to be always aware of these things when you take money for programs. I've seen it so many times on council, these types of things do exactly that. But again, I'm not opposed to it, because to have the plan would be a good thing.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Worship. Just to comment on what Councillor Maldas is saying, I agree with that sort of, as sort of a good policy or way to make our or something to consider when we're making our decisions based on these types of grants. But I think if there's a recommendation for us to update this emergency management plan every 3 years, as the corporate officer had said, and this would work towards that, then in this case specifically, I think the staff time would, be required for the emergency management.
Where does the
plan.
recommendation come from? The same provincial government that isn't willing to fund it except this time. That's the problem.
Any further comments, questions? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to correspondence, item J1, August 26th. Correspondence report, refer to the CKO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will refer over to the corporate officer for this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The correspondence report deals with one item for action. Was a email from a gentleman who is requesting the town to consider changing its zoning bylaws to prohibit the hauling of groundwater for commercial sale or bulk export. council may wish to consider his request in the prohibiting of the bottling of groundwater by implementing a bylaw that prohibits bottling of groundwater and supporting the Strathcona Regional District, or council may wish to receive and file. I did ask the Director of Operations with regards to this email information that we received, and he thought it might be worthy if council was considering that to speak to a hydrologist to see if for any kind of a blanket ban was considered.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had a question actually for Councillor Benjamin Millen, because you said on the RDOS. Do you know if this letter's gone to RDOS as well, and if this is something that they've considered?
I haven't seen it there, it's not something that we've talked about for sure, but I can check. To follow up, it makes sense that it would be something that we would do as a region.
Right.
Like a regional district with all the communities signing on. When I first read the correspondence that we received, it seems like, in my opinion, a total no-brainer, honestly. But I'm sure there are always consequences to actions and those sorts of things, so to know the full story ahead of time, sort of probably why it makes sense. And in the meantime, supporting Strathcona Regional District's resolution at UBCM is something that we can all do independently.
It is interesting because it was noted earlier tonight that our aquifers are low and we're on water restrictions, so it's something to consider.
Councillor Mattis?
Michelle.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Michelle.
all right. Nothing covers. Anyway, I think that we as a town would be smart to do this, even if other towns don't. I don't think that we should wait for the whole region to do it, because there might be another town that decides they want to have a business open up where they boil water. Why should we preclude them? But I think we should, I agree with this, that we shouldn't be allowing it in our town.
Councillor Benjamin.
The question that I had was, so it's not something that we're doing right now. If somebody came forward with a business proposal to extract water for bottling, that's something that would come from council at that time. Is it not, or is it just something that we would discuss?
CEO.
Thank you, Worship. As the Director of Operations indicated, the licensing for getting water out of the aquifer is through the ministry. But I'm just thinking that we have a water depot just 2 blocks down where people can go and fill up water jugs. Stores have things where they can get water from.
I think this is specifically referring to like big corporation stuff.
Commercial
Putting out
businesses.
water bottles full
Yeah.
of water. out of your
Nestle and
aquifers.
Coke as well.
Yeah, I was trying not to name names, but.
Oh, we can, because they do it.
But that's something that goes through the ministry.
So then we would need we would need something prohibiting
What?
that if we're opposed to the idea.
I might suggest that you refer it back to staff for additional information.
Good idea.
Make a motion and refer back to staff for additional information.
I'll second.
Second.
And in the meantime, we can all independently support the resolution that's going forward in a couple of weeks. Should we choose to do so?
We choose. I think it would be good to have more information about the approval process, like if somebody wants to do that, where they can tap into it. What approval they can get or can't get, and who can stand in the way of that approval would be. I don't necessarily wanna blanket eliminate everything, because then you might have to come back on it someday, especially without any evidence, other than, I think it's a good idea. So it'd just be good to have more information before making that kind of decision. Councillor Madison?
We do have a couple of protections in place in that there are no wells allowed in town, to my knowledge. And then the second protection is